So in my teens, I was very much, and I had a stepson who I could see the same passion in him, but I was very much drawn to, like, okay, if biology is the study of life and evolution is the study of how life adapts to the environment over the over the over the course of time, then the study of evolution is where we find the secrets that we seek. And I was very much drawn to become an evolutionary biologist, and then that didn't work out in the way I'd hoped, and I ended up on a whale research ship. And I remember I was 18 at the time, and there was a 28-year-old PhD scientist who was a student of, I can't remember his exact field of research, but it was to do with whales. And there was a moment where he turned around to me. Now, this could have been just because I was a pesky kid, and it's no reflection on him necessarily, but it had a big high voltage moment for me. He said, "Nathan, you ask too many questions." And I don't think he knew how potent that moment was for me. I never revealed it to him. But there was an awareness that came into my moment at that time that said, well, he's wrong about that. You asked too few. And what I mean by that was that there was something in me that was looking for a more subtle, nuanced spectrum of meaning than I was finding in the realm of scientific endeavor. I'm not against scientific endeavor, I'm all for it. But dhyana in Sanskrit, the word for meditation, it means to measure. And what I was coming up against with him was this sense that science measures, but like, at what point does the instrument that's measuring become flawed? At what point does it reveal to you its limitations? And what do you do with that? And that's sort of what happened in that moment for me. And there was a moment of, often with growth comes pains, growing pains, but there was a moment of growth, and there was a moment of like futility, like, oh God, what am I doing? Why am I walking away from this very valuable path? Well, part of me had just ceased to believe that I would find the deeper meaning there. And I suppose that was the birth of me as a philosopher, and as a philosophy means the love of wisdom. And not long after that, within about a year or so, I met Tara Singh, who was, this incredible spiritually advanced being. And what I found, that the study of genetics, the study of nature versus nurture, the study of evolutionary biology, has in common with the path that went on from there, which is where I went to yoga, was there are collections of genes that code for what's going to happen. There are collections of thoughts, memes, that code for what's going to happen. So you can kind of predict often what people do, because if you understand their genetic nature and their thought system, you can see how they're going to respond to circumstances. But in India, like, they have the word vasana, which means impression, and that breeds a habit, which is samskara, and these things code for our thoughts, and they code for our genes. This was the subtler level that I was looking at. But then when you start to see that there's a way of seeing that the observer is the observed, that this collection of habits is not your final destination, that it's not your final summation, then that person, like, what's his name, Carlos Castaneda has this beautiful quote where he says, only the man of spirit. I don't know how he puts it. It's a bruja in Spanish, like that's a witch. But like he has this word which describes a person that is sort of vertical. He says you can't predict those people because they're not trapped in the association with their past habits, right? And so those people, Thomas Merton says the same thing, that a contemplative is the most dangerous man in the world because he's listening. It's not like his, yes, our genetics are what Ramana Maharshi calls our Prarabdha karma, our the karma of our past actions seem to have a bind over us. But the more we trust in this other set of forces that influence perception, or shall we say influence shifts in the perceiver. A miracle is defined as a shift in perception, where the perception is being informed by the ego and by fear and by unconscious fear and by the limitations of the mind and the laws of the world. And this is where, like, when I started to study the Indian saints, because they've got such a rich history, you know, there's a story that Yogananda tells, and there's this man that's eating clabbered milk. Well, he thinks it's clabbered milk, you know, he spends a half a month under the water, you know, at the bottom of a river, and then he comes up to eat, and he's like floats on roofs, and there's all these, you know, powerful yogic cities, yogic powers that he has. And one day, like, one of his like detractors like comes along because he accepts like clabbered milk as food, and the man is a doubting Thomas, shall we say, and he gives him this big bucket of milk, you know, which the man just eats. Like, he's a huge man, like I can't remember his name, it's something like Taittiriya Yogi, but he eats the whole thing, but it's actually poisonous paint that would kill a man. And the man is just, the yogi's really grateful, and he smiles and says thank you, and then sort of after that smile he sort of looks very directly at this character that has fed him the poison. And for a split second, the experience of the agony of this food is transferred to the man that's done the dirty deed, shall we say. And then so the guy waves his hand and just nonchalantly says, don't do that again, you know, because like you have little faith. So what is very uncomfortable for materialists to develop, an atheist to develop into looking at, is that it's irrelevant whether there's a God or not. It's utterly irrelevant, right? And then you've got all these evangelists that are trying to say Jesus will save you, and you know, Buddha is the way, or whatever, and it's like, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to the pursuit of meaning. What is relevant is to say, is there something beyond the thought system of the ego? Is there something that transcends that? Is there a self? And that's why I'm so drawn to Ramana Maharshi, because he doesn't, like, one of the challenges that I have with the Course in Miracles, though it's a brilliant text, it's all about God this and Holy Spirit that, and the Son of God that, and even in the Course it says, well, that's all kind of irrelevant, you know, because the only thing, all of those are separate identities that are useful as teaching aids for a certain part of the journey, but they, you know, oneness doesn't have differences. But the idea of the Holy Spirit is that it speaks to the part of the mind that is trapped in the dream from the level which isn't. And the dream of illusions, Maya, that the Indians call it. And the Son is this entity that is part of that father-sonship, you know, that is waking up to his real identity. That's what those things mean. But what I love about Ramana's thing is, like, he just drops all of that stuff and he says, with discrimination, listening to the right voice in your head, the voice of sanity that transcends the belief that I'm a body, the deepest psychotherapeutic path, transpersonal psychology, psychotherapy, transpersonal psychotherapy. Listening to that discrimination brings you into the awareness that the second and the third person are an illusion, because everything is a holographic projection of the self, and it's either a holographic projection of the self or of the ego's thought system. And as the mind gets quiet, then those habits that tie you to the ego, like the saint that sees the truth and the love in everything beyond the pain that the ego would have us report and justify our wrath with, that quality of looking transforms the world into a place of wonder and meaning and liberation. And we think that accumulation and pleasing people that are flawed in their perception of what this world's really about, or ourselves making ourselves a success in this, what Krishnamurti called, it's hardly a sign of psychological health to be extremely well suited to a very sick world. So anyone that's going to take this path of what Emerson said, whosoever would be a man would be a nonconformist, they're going to have to probably struggle with this authority problem in their head for some time, and probably go through some turbulent passages in the flight of their lives, because they're having to sort out what informs their seeing. And one of the things that really helped me see through the delusion of gurus, like Ramana was called a guru, but he said, don't make me into a guru, and Krishnamurti said to Desikachar, my yoga teacher, don't become a guru, because then the ego comes in and it's got a spiritual ego now, and it thinks I'm going to save people. And I remember someone saying to me, look, a true student of the Course in Miracles, a true seeker of truth, there's only one job, and that's to change how you see the world, because everything else out there is an illusion. Everyone else is you pushed out, that's what Neville Goddard said, everyone else is you pushed out. So how you see them reflects how you see yourself. And this journey that I've had from measuring like genetics and measuring value and comparing myself to others and seeing others do that, over time you see that's an attack upon the truth, and it all starts to fall away. And then pragmatism remains, and humanism remains, and compassion remains. But if anyone says that, going to church, showing up to a spiritual retreat or whatever is what this life's about, or being a great success in the world is what this life's about, none of those things are necessarily good or bad. They're just part of living. But it's really about this profound transformation of consciousness. And the loneliness in man wants to persuade others to follow. And I was like, why am I doing these videos yesterday? And I had a dream last night, and I was standing with a great gardener. Well, not so much a great gardener, but just to forget this whole word great, but this man that had great love for the garden that he was working in, and I was helping him. And we were planting all these seeds, and then somehow when I looked at them, I could see them at every stage of their growth. Like slow motion footage. And I saw the seed, and then I saw it like a quarter of an inch high, and then half an inch, then an inch, and then 6 inches. And I just saw it sprouting up, And I was like, well, someone asked me, why are you doing the YouTube channel? And I was like, well, I've come to a point, like this in the Course in Miracles, it says you come to a point, a crossroads, right? And you can't go back, but you can delay. And I was coming into the awareness, because my teacher said that I would be a teacher of the Course in Miracles, that would be my destiny. And the hairs went back up on the back of my neck. Actually, it was a psychic, an old woman in Los Angeles. And I think that, I've created Sutra Novum because I'm not comfortable with Christ and God and Holy Spirit. I grew up in a family where those things were frowned upon, and rightly so in many ways, because they've been used as ego daggers to attack people. So and the word Sutra Novum came to me, and it was like, oh, that's a good way to do it, because then you can compare Ramana's teaching with Course in Miracles, and then you're not trapped in this language. You're looking at beyond the form, at the function of the mind. And that has really, like, I've tried to be an English teacher as a full-time profession. I'm going back to that most likely. I've tried to be a psychotherapist within the system that is not as enlightened as the Course in Miracles. I've tried to be a scientist. I've done all these different things, an entrepreneur, and then it's like Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. You know, when you follow your bliss, other doors will open, and you're planting all these seeds with the YouTube videos. And this is the most valuable content that I think we can discuss, you know, and it's like I'm drawing upon the Stoics in Greece, I'm drawing upon the yoga philosophy and the history of these great yogis like Ramanuja, and then the lineage I studied in India, and I'm drawing on science, and I'm drawing on physics, and all of these are contributing to this and the Course in Miracles, of course, but they're not under the, like, they're just like, they're sort of like, Sutra Novum sort of speaks to people who are uncomfortable with organized religion, like, and I don't want to become a guru, but so my answer to my friend, he said, well, I'm doing this because I want to, like, in the Course it says that the teachers that come to teach the Course in Miracles, they're not perfect and anything but they use this material to transform their minds, to see with, you know, with perfection. There's that Leonard Cohen line, you know, it's a wonderful song, you know, about, I can't remember the quote right now, but it's something like the perfect mind and your perfect body, you know, and it's like the body is just a neutral thing, but then, you know, Jesus dropped beneath your wisdom like a stone, you know, and it's like this wonderful line that he wrote. It's like the mastery of dropping the ego thought system and embracing spiritual sight, that goal is the only one that matters, because it's the only one that frees the animal that you think you are from the trap that you set yourself. And that animal that gets freed transforms into something else. But there is a trap that you've made for yourself, and it's not something that is just you that's made it, but it's been made in this holographic realm where the part is in the whole and the whole is in the part. And your job is to start looking at sorrow and misery and be a vehicle to examine your deceived identity, right? And then when you do that, you become a pillar of change. But it's not a pillar of change in that you're persuading other people to see the world differently. You're just really talking to yourself into a narrative that liberates you of pain. And you could do that in total silence. And in my case, I find, like, my name means a gift, and my gift is to want to talk about these things. And at some point I might shut up. That's okay too. But where there's a natural flow of expression in a realm that interests you, I think that's something you have to follow. Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. And he takes that from this Indian saying that there's Sat, Chit, Ananda, right? Sat is truth, Chit is the deep mind or consciousness, like Chitta in Sanskrit means deep mind. And then Ananda is bliss, right? So truth will take you to the deep mind, and that will reflect your true nature, which is bliss. And you may not be at that level yet, but you may have inklings of where your interest lies. And for me, there's always been this death. There's this death of the evolutionary biologist. There's this death of this hyper-analytical scientist. There's this death of even the yogi that wants to teach the Eightfold Path of yoga. And then there's this sort of beautiful simplicity of, well, what's informing your thought system? And is that bringing you peace? And that's really what Sutra Novum is about. It's about drawing on all these different, apparently discordant influences to sort of weave this sutra of freshness and meaning that reflects a mind that is totally devoted to transcending suffering at the deepest level, not at the superficial level where doctors are working. And there's no judgment of doctors, but they're like body mechanics. And often doctors are stuck in trying to treat the symptoms because that's their job. They're like, okay, you've got a broken valve here, or you need to replace this cylinder, and you put a kidney in, and that's a wonderful job. It's a great job. It can only be lauded. But in the Course in Miracles it says only the mind can be sick. Only the mind is in need of healing, because the mind is aligned with this identity that it's a body. And so this is my place to discuss these reflections. And it's a place where there's a lot of bridges of sighs. You've got all these examinations going on in the story of the world, the story of experience. And the Bridge of Sighs is from Venice and Oxford. This borrowed it in Cambridge too. And people walk across this bridge after they've had their exams, or before, and there's sighs on both sides, like, oh, I'm going into the exam, or oh, I'm leaving the exam, thank God it's over, or gosh, I messed up. But there's these sighs where you're reflecting on the lesson of the school of life that you're walking through. And I was somewhat inspired by the School of Life to develop Sutra Novum. It's going to grow over time, like my dream reflected last night. And just keep focusing on what is most important for you. That's the message of my journey into Sutra Novum, because many times, there's a quote, I can't remember, it says, some of the most brilliant people are beset by the worst doubt, and some of the most confident, ruthless, mean people have no doubt, And I think it's very healthy to have doubt, because on a certain level, because if you think you're right, the Course in Miracles says, choose once again, right? So it's taken me a long time to say, okay, it's time to do this, because my own understanding didn't feel like it was mature enough. Now it does, because I've had so many inner experiences that help support me in seeing where I was flawed in my perceptions. And I think that can be useful to others. So that's why I take it to the road and decide to build a life around the thought system of Ramana and the Course in Miracles, because there's always going to be a few people that are interested in looking at the roots of their suffering and handling that, as opposed to blame and the games of the ego that wants a scapegoat and wants to get embroiled in the injury of oneself.